Nurse Amara Ellison had spent 3 nights keeping Benedict Wycliffe alive, yet his son fired her the moment the millionaire opened his eyes. The dismissal happened in the private cardiac wing of St. Orison Medical Center, inside a room Benedict's family had transformed into something between an executive suite and a guarded fortress. Fresh white lilies stood on every surface. 2 private security officers waited outside the door. A family attorney occupied the corner beside a locked briefcase, while Benedict's eldest son, Lawrence Wycliffe, spoke to hospital administrators as though he were negotiating the purchase of the building. Amara stood near the bed, checking the infusion pump that regulated Benedict's blood pressure. She was 39 with calm dark eyes, tightly braided hair pinned beneath a surgical cap, and the controlled posture of someone who had learned not to let exhaustion show in front of frightened families. Benedict had regained consciousness 20 minutes earlier. His speech remained weak. His right hand trembled against the blanket. He remembered entering the hospital for what had been described as a routine cardiac procedure, but he did not yet understand why he had spent 6 days unconscious afterward. Lawrence intended to control what his father learned. "Mr. Wycliffe's care will be transferred immediately," he told the nursing director. "This nurse is no longer permitted in the room." Amara looked up from the pump. Nursing Director Celia Varn paused. "On what grounds?" Lawrence turned toward Amara without hiding his contempt. "Negligence, insubordination, unauthorized treatment. Choose whichever term your Human Resources Department prefers." Benedict's eyes moved toward his son. Amara remained beside the bed. "The medication adjustment is due in 12 minutes. Whoever replaces me needs the updated dosage chart." "You will not touch another medication," Lawrence said. The order was entered by Dr. Havel. "I said you're finished." Amara looked at Celia, expecting her supervisor to intervene. Celia's face revealed discomfort, but also fear. The Wycliffe family had donated $30 million toward the construction of the cardiac wing. Benedict's name appeared above its entrance in bronze letters. Lawrence sat on the hospital foundation board and controlled future funding. "Amara," Celia said quietly, "step outside while we clarify this." "There is nothing to clarify," Lawrence replied. "She disobeyed the attending physician during my father's emergency. She prevented Dr. Havel from following the approved treatment plan and administered medication without family authorization." "Family authorization is not required during a life-threatening emergency," Amara said. Lawrence's expression hardened. "This is exactly the attitude I'm talking about. Your father's blood pressure is still unstable. You are trying to protect yourself. I am protecting my patient. My father is not your patient anymore." For the first time, Benedict spoke. The word was faint and uneven. "Why?" Lawrence approached the bed immediately. "Dad, don't strain yourself. There were complications, but everything is under control." Benedict looked past him toward Amara. "She stayed." Lawrence lowered his voice. "You were heavily sedated. You don't know who was here." Benedict's brow tightened as if he were reaching through fragments of memory. Amara remembered those fragments clearly. Benedict's hand closing around her wrist during the first night, his lips moving behind an oxygen mask, the terrified effort with which he whispered the name Clara, his late wife. Amara had not corrected him. She had simply remained until the fear passed. Lawrence faced the nursing director again. "Escort her out." Security entered before Celia could respond. Amara disconnected her identification badge from her uniform and placed it on the counter. "The current infusion rate is 7 micrograms per minute. His latest potassium result was low. The replacement order is still pending pharmacy verification." Another nurse, Tessa Miramont, stepped forward and accepted the handwritten chart. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. She had worked beside Amara throughout Benedict's crisis and knew exactly what Lawrence was doing. "I'll take it," Tessa said. Lawrence pointed toward the door. Amara looked at Benedict one final time. His eyes remained fixed on her, confused and afraid. "You are awake," she told him gently. "That is what matters." Then she left the room between two security officers while the millionaire's son watched as though he had removed a threat. 3 days earlier, Benedict Wycliffe had arrived at St. Orison for a scheduled procedure to replace a failing heart valve. At 72, he was one of the most powerful real estate investors in the country. His company owned luxury towers, shopping centers, private clinics, and entire blocks of housing in 3 major cities. He was admired for his discipline, feared for his temper, and rarely seen without the silver walking cane he had used since a riding accident. The valve procedure was expected to last 2 hours. Dr. Alistair Havel performed it. Havel was 56, celebrated in medical journals, admired by donors, and nearly as valuable to St. Orison's reputation as the Wycliffe family's money. He had performed hundreds of similar procedures and spoke about risk with the confidence of a man who believed statistics respected him personally. Before surgery, Benedict asked Amara whether she would be in the recovery unit afterward. "I'm assigned to the cardiac intensive care floor tonight," she said. "Then make sure they don't let my children turn the room into a board meeting." Amara almost smiled. "I can limit visitors according to your medical needs." That means yes. Benedict's relationship with his 3 children was built from money, expectation, and long periods of mutual disappointment. Lawrence, the eldest, served as executive vice chairman of Wycliffe Urban Holdings and expected to inherit control. Benedict's daughter, Sabine Wycliffe, directed the family arts foundation but avoided corporate conflict. The youngest son, Julian Wycliffe, had left the company years earlier and lived abroad. Lawrence remained closest to his father's power, though not necessarily to the man himself. The procedure appeared successful at first. Benedict entered recovery with stable vital signs. Dr. Havel ordered standard anticoagulation therapy to prevent clot formation around the new valve. During the first hour, Amara noticed something unusual. Benedict's drainage output increased rapidly. His blood pressure fell. His skin became pale and cold. The monitor showed a rising heart rate, but his oxygen level remained deceptively normal. Amara checked the surgical site and called Dr. Havel's resident, Dr. Nikhil Berenson. "The output has doubled in 20 minutes, she said. "He may be bleeding internally." Nikhil reviewed the chart and contacted Havel. The surgeon replied that mild bleeding was expected after the procedure and instructed them to continue the anticoagulant. Amara requested a bedside ultrasound. Havel declined. "He was clear," Nikhil said. "Continue the protocol." Amara looked at the dark red fluid collecting in the drainage chamber. "This is not routine." The attending reviewed the numbers. He reviewed them by phone. Nikhil's voice dropped. "Do not make this harder than it needs to be." Amara had heard those words before. They were often spoken when someone wanted obedience to look like professionalism. She repeated the blood tests. Benedict's hemoglobin had fallen. His blood pressure dropped again. He became restless and complained of pain between his shoulder blades. Amara called Havel directly. "His condition is deteriorating," she said. "I am aware of the numbers. He needs imaging now. He needs time to stabilize. He may not have time." There was a pause. "Continue the anticoagulant and give the ordered fluid bolus." "Doctor, I am formally questioning the order." Havel's voice changed. "You are a nurse, Ms. Ellison. Your concern has been documented. Follow the treatment plan." Amara looked through the glass wall at Benedict. Lawrence stood beside the bed, speaking on his phone, while an assistant showed him company documents. Benedict's eyes had closed. His breathing had become shallow. Amara ended the call and activated the hospital's rapid response protocol. That decision brought a critical care physician, respiratory therapist, pharmacist, and ultrasound technician to the room. Dr. Maeve Tolland, the intensive care specialist on duty, performed an immediate scan. Blood was accumulating around Benedict's heart. The pressure was compressing the heart muscle and preventing it from pumping properly. He was developing cardiac tamponade, a medical emergency that could kill him within minutes. "Stop the anticoagulant," Maeve ordered. "Prepare for emergency drainage." Lawrence blocked the doorway. Dr. Havel said the bleeding was expected. Maeve did not look away from the ultrasound screen. Dr. Havel is wrong. You cannot change my father's treatment without consulting him. Your father is crashing. Lawrence stepped toward Amara. What did you do? Amara was already preparing emergency medication. I recognized the bleeding. You caused this by interfering with the infusion. I have not interfered with anything. The monitor alarmed. Benedict's blood pressure collapsed. His heart rhythm slowed, then became chaotic. The room transformed instantly. The bed was lowered. Staff moved equipment into position. Lawrence was pushed into the corridor as Benedict lost consciousness. Dr. Maeve attempted emergency drainage at the bedside, but thick clotted blood prevented adequate relief. Benedict needed an operating room immediately. Then his heart stopped. The official resuscitation lasted 14 minutes. The truth was more complicated than the timeline later summarized in the medical record. During the first several minutes, the team followed standard measures. Compressions began, medication was administered. Maeve continued trying to relieve pressure around the heart. Benedict did not respond. Havel arrived during the code, angry that the rapid response team had been activated without him. He ordered the staff to stop attempts at bedside drainage and transfer Benedict immediately. Amara looked at the monitor, the ultrasound, and the rigidly swollen drainage line. He will not survive the elevator, she said. Havel ignored her. Prepare transport. He needs the chest reopened here. This is not an operating room. There's no circulation. I gave you an order. Amara saw Benedict's skin turn gray. She also saw something Havel had missed. The drainage tube had become blocked by a large clot. The blood surrounding the heart could not escape. She opened an emergency surgical kit and handed it to Maeve. Havel stepped between them. No. Maeve looked from the kit to Benedict. Alistair, she may be right. We are moving him. Amara spoke with controlled urgency. If we move him, he dies. Lawrence stood beyond the glass, watching through the open door. Havel pointed at Amara. Leave this room. She did not move. Benedict had no pulse. There was no time for hospital politics, family influence, or professional hierarchy. Maeve made the decision Havel would later try to claim as his own. Open the chest. The emergency procedure was performed beside the intensive care bed. Maeve created access while Amara maintained equipment, medication timing, and sterile support. The obstruction was cleared. Pressure around the heart released in a sudden rush of blood. But Benedict's heart remained motionless. Havel ordered another medication dose. Amara looked at the rhythm and at the dosage already given. Not yet, she said. He has received the maximum interval dose. Havel reached for the syringe. He needs it. It could worsen the arrhythmia if circulation returns. You are obstructing resuscitation. Amara physically moved the medication tray out of his reach and asked the pharmacist to confirm the timing. The pharmacist did. The dose was withheld. Maeve applied internal cardiac stimulation. Benedict's heart contracted once, then again. A weak pulse returned. He reached the operating room 9 minutes later and survived a second surgery. The official hospital summary initially described the event as a recognized post-operative complication managed through emergency surgical intervention by the cardiac team. It did not mention that Amara had recognized the bleeding hours earlier. It did not mention that Havel ordered continued anticoagulation. It did not mention that he tried to move a pulseless patient rather than perform the procedure that saved him. And it did not mention that Amara prevented an unnecessary medication dose during the most fragile moment of the resuscitation. Lawrence received a different version. Havel told him that Amara had panicked, activated an unnecessary response, and interfered with treatment. He claimed her actions delayed the transfer to surgery. He suggested that the complications became worse because she refused to follow direction. Lawrence believed him immediately. Havel was a famous surgeon. Amara was a nurse he barely remembered seeing before the crisis. The difference in status was enough. While Benedict remained unconscious, Lawrence began restructuring his father's care. He restricted access to the medical chart, hired a private physician to review treatment, and demanded Amara's removal. When Tessa defended her, Lawrence warned that future donations to the hospital would depend on whether staff respected the family's wishes. The administration compromised in the way institutions often did when fear disguised itself as balance. Amara was placed on administrative leave pending review. Lawrence called it termination. By the time Amara reached the employee locker room, her access card had already been disabled. She removed her spare shoes and a framed photograph of her daughter from the locker. The photograph showed 16-year-old Liana wearing a blue graduation gown from middle school, laughing because the cap was sliding over one eye. Tessa entered and closed the door behind her. "You should not be leaving alone. I'm not being arrested. They are treating you like you committed a crime. They need someone with less power than Havel." Tessa's voice shook. "You saved him. We all did. You were the first person who saw it." Maeve opened his chest. "Because you put the kit in her hand." Amara placed the photograph in her bag. "The chart will show what happened." Tessa looked toward the locked door. "Will it?" That question followed Amara home. St. Orison used an electronic medical record system that tracked every order, change, medication, alarm, and staff entry. In theory, the timeline could not be rewritten. In practice, summaries could omit details, notes could be amended. Words like refused could replace questioned. An action that prevented harm could be described as interference if the person writing the report held more authority. Amara knew documentation mattered. During Benedict's deterioration, she had entered detailed nursing notes, the increasing drainage, repeated calls to Havel, his instruction to continue anticoagulation, and the exact time she activated the rapid response team. When she tried to access her copy through the employee portal, her credentials no longer worked. The next morning, an investigator from the hospital's risk management department called her. His name was Desmond Keel. "We need your statement regarding the events of Tuesday night." "Has Dr. Havel submitted his?" "I cannot discuss another employee's statement." "Am I still employed?" "You are on unpaid administrative suspension." Lawrence Wycliffe told everyone I was fired. "Mr. Wycliffe does not make employment decisions. He made this one." Desmond paused. "The hospital is attempting to manage a sensitive situation. A patient nearly died because a surgeon dismissed obvious bleeding. What part of that is sensitive?" "Ms. Ellison, I suggest you obtain representation before using language that could be considered defamatory." Amara ended the call. She contacted union attorney Amani Dorsey, who had represented nurses disciplined after reporting unsafe staffing levels. Amani listened without interruption and asked only precise questions. "Did you document the output?" "Yes." "Did you record the calls?" "The hospital system records calls made through the clinical line." "Did you state that you were formally questioning the order?" "Yes." "Were there witnesses when Havel tried to administer the additional medication?" "Maeve, Tessa, the pharmacist, 2 residents, respiratory staff." "Then why is the hospital suspending you?" "Because Havel brings them prestige and the Wycliffes bring them money." Amani leaned back. "Good. You understand the case." The hospital review began behind closed doors. Havel's report claimed Benedict's bleeding progressed suddenly and could not have been predicted earlier. He stated that Amara became emotionally reactive and initiated procedures outside her scope. He admitted ordering the extra medication, but said she responded by grabbing the tray and creating confusion during resuscitation. Lawrence submitted a written complaint alleging that Amara spoke aggressively to physicians and exposed Benedict to unnecessary risk. Tessa was interviewed twice. Maeve was instructed not to contact Amara because she remained a potential witness. The pharmacist's statement disappeared from the first review packet due to what the administration later called a clerical error. 10 days after the incident, the hospital formally terminated Amara for failure to follow the chain of command during a medical emergency. The letter praised her years of service before concluding that clinical excellence depends upon disciplined collaboration. Amara read it twice. She had worked at St. Orison for 14 years. She had trained new nurses, served on the Emergency Response Committee, and received 3 patient care awards. None of it weighed as much as one angry millionaire and one surgeon protecting his reputation. Liana found her mother sitting at the kitchen table with the termination letter. "Are we going to lose the apartment?" she asked. Amara folded the paper. "Not immediately." "That means maybe." "It means I'm going to solve one problem at a time." Liana sat across from her. "Did you do something wrong?" Amara had spent years teaching her daughter not to judge herself through other people's accusations. Now she needed to follow her own advice. "I disobeyed a doctor." Liana's face changed. "Because his order could have killed someone." "So you did the right thing." "I did what I believed was right with the information I had." "That sounds like the same thing." "It is not always that simple." "Did the man live?" "Yes." "Then maybe it is." Benedict recovered slowly. Lawrence controlled his visitors and restricted discussion of the emergency. Havel told Benedict that his heart had stopped because of an unpredictable surgical complication. He described the resuscitation as a successful team response led by him. When Benedict asked where Amara was, Lawrence said she had been removed for mishandling his care. Benedict did not accept the answer. He remembered very little, but one sensation remained clear: a woman's voice repeatedly telling him to stay with her. Not a doctor, not his son, a nurse. "Bring me my full record," he told Lawrence. "You need rest." "I asked for the record." "The physicians have already explained what happened." "I did not build a company by relying on explanations prepared by interested parties." Lawrence smiled carefully. "You nearly died. It's normal to feel uncertain." Benedict stared at him. "Do not use my weakness as permission to speak to me like a child." 2 days later, he requested the records directly from the hospital. The packet delivered to his room contained a summary, operative reports, medication list, and selected notes. It did not include the audit trail. Benedict noticed gaps in the timeline. The summary said his condition declined unexpectedly at 9:42 p.m., yet a nursing entry referenced abnormal drainage at 7:18. A medication had been discontinued during the emergency, but no explanation was attached. The record stated that staff disagreement briefly complicated transfer, without identifying the disagreement. He called the hospital's chief medical officer, Dr. Ansel Rourke. "I want every record," Benedict said. "You have received the complete clinical file. I want the raw chart, order history, call logs, alarm timeline, amended notes, deleted entries, access history, and internal review." Ansel hesitated. "Some of those materials are administrative rather than medical. They concern the night my heart stopped. The review is confidential. This wing has my name above the door. Do not confuse that with permission to hide what happened inside it." Lawrence arrived while Benedict was still on the phone. "You are exhausting yourself over a nurse who ignored instructions." Benedict ended the call. "What exactly did she ignore?" "Havel ordered her to prepare you for surgery. She delayed him." "Were you in the room?" "I saw enough." "That was not my question." Lawrence looked away for half a second. Benedict noticed. "Where is she?" "She was terminated." "By whom?" "The hospital." "After your complaint?" "She was dangerous." Benedict's voice remained weak, but his stare sharpened. "You have always mistaken confidence for proof." Lawrence left the room without answering. That evening, Benedict called his daughter Sabine. Unlike Lawrence, Sabine had been in another city during the procedure. She arrived the next morning and listened to her father's concerns. "Lawrence says the nurse interfered with Havel," she said. "Lawrence says whatever protects the structure he already prefers." "Do you remember what happened?" "Pieces." Benedict looked toward the window. "I remember being unable to breathe. I remember someone saying my pressure was falling. I remember that nurse arguing with a man." "About what?" "I don't know." He closed his eyes. "And I remember waking for a moment before everything disappeared." She was holding my hand. Sabine requested the full medical record as her father's authorized representative. The hospital delayed. That delay made her suspicious. She contacted an independent medical records attorney, Raphael Quill, who petitioned for immediate preservation of every digital entry connected to Benedict's treatment. The hospital received the legal notice before administrators could complete their internal review. No chart entry could be altered or deleted without creating evidence of tampering. The raw records arrived under court supervision 4 days later. They filled thousands of pages. Raphael hired Dr. Selene Varick, an independent cardiac specialist with no connection to St. Orison. Selene reconstructed the timeline minute by minute. At 7:11 p.m., Amara documented increased drainage. At 7:16, she paged the resident. At 7:21, she requested imaging. At 7:24, Havel declined and ordered anticoagulation continued. At 7:39, Amara documented worsening blood pressure and called again. At 7:43, she formally questioned the order. At 8:02, laboratory results confirmed significant blood loss. At 8:06, Havel again declined imaging. At 8:18, Amara activated the rapid response team. At 8:23, ultrasound revealed blood compressing the heart. At 8:31, Benedict lost consciousness. At 8:37, his heart stopped. At 8:42, Havel ordered transfer despite the absence of a pulse. At 8:43, Amara warned that Benedict would not survive the transfer. At 8:45, Maeve opened the chest at the bedside. At 8:48, pressure was released. At 8:49, Havel ordered an additional medication dose. At 8:49 and 32 seconds, Amara refused to release the syringe until the pharmacist confirmed the dose interval. At 8:50, the pharmacist advised against administration. At 8:51, Benedict's heartbeat returned. The records were clear. Without Amara's repeated escalation, the bleeding would have remained untreated longer. Without her resistance to the transfer order, Benedict might have died in the elevator. Without her intervention over the additional medication, the returning heart rhythm could have been destabilized. Selene looked across the table at Benedict, Sabine, and Raphael. "The nurse did not obstruct the response," she said. "She initiated the response that saved you." Benedict remained silent. Sabine asked, "What about Dr. Havel?" He dismissed multiple warning signs, continued medication that worsened the bleeding, delayed imaging, and attempted to move a patient without circulation. "Then why was Amara fired?" Selene closed the chart. "That is not a medical question." Raphael examined the audit trail more closely. Someone had amended several notes after the emergency. Havel changed his first report 14 hours later, replacing the phrase, "Nurse raised concern regarding drainage," with, "Nurse appeared anxious about expected drainage." An administrator added the words, "brief staff confusion" to the resuscitation summary. Desmond Keel, the risk management investigator, removed the pharmacist's statement from the original review file before it was sent to the hospital board. Most disturbing of all, Lawrence accessed a special family portal 3 times during the internal investigation and received confidential updates about witness statements. He had not merely complained, he had been allowed to influence the review. Benedict asked to see the video recordings from the intensive care corridor. The hospital initially claimed no camera captured the interior of patient rooms. That was true, but a ceiling-mounted safety camera above the corridor showed the open doorway during much of the resuscitation. There was no sound. The images were enough. Benedict watched Havel point toward the exit while Amara remained beside the emergency cart. He watched staff begin to move the bed, then stop when Amara and Maeve intervened. He watched Amara hand Maeve the surgical kit. He watched Havel reach for the medication tray and Amara move it toward the pharmacist, and he watched Lawrence stand outside the room doing nothing while the nurse he later fired fought to keep Benedict alive. Benedict viewed the recording twice. Then he asked everyone except Sabine to leave. "My son knew she saved me," he said. Sabine sat beside the bed. He may not have understood the medicine. He understood enough to see who acted and who hesitated. Why would he protect Havel? Benedict already suspected the answer. Havel was not merely Benedict's surgeon. He was also a secret investor in a private cardiac clinic network Lawrence planned to acquire through Wycliffe Urban Holdings. The deal depended on Havel's reputation. A finding of serious medical negligence could destroy the acquisition, expose conflicts of interest, and cost Lawrence tens of millions. The family's private transaction records confirmed it. Lawrence had not fired Amara only because she challenged his authority. He fired her because her account threatened a business deal. Benedict summoned Lawrence to the hospital room that evening. The son arrived with 2 attorneys. Benedict had Raphael and Sabine beside him. A monitor recorded the meeting with everyone's consent. "I have reviewed the full record," Benedict said. Lawrence's expression remained controlled. "You should not be burdening yourself with legal files during recovery." Amara Ellison identified the bleeding before Havel did. Havel said, "I did not ask what Havel said." Lawrence stopped. Benedict continued, "She activated the team. She opposed moving me without a pulse. She prevented an unsafe medication dose. The situation was chaotic. The timestamps are not chaotic." Lawrence glanced toward his attorneys. Benedict noticed the movement. "You complained about her before the hospital completed its investigation. She was insubordinate." She was correct. A hospital cannot function if nurses ignore surgeons. A hospital cannot function if everyone obeys a surgeon who is wrong. Lawrence leaned forward. "You are reducing a complex emergency to one person's version." "I have read every version." Benedict placed a folder on the blanket. "I also reviewed your investment agreement with Dr. Havel." The color left Lawrence's face. Sabine looked at her brother with open disgust. "You hid a financial relationship with Dad's surgeon." "It was a preliminary business opportunity." "You allowed him to perform the procedure while negotiating with you?" "Havel was selected because he was the best." "And afterward you protected him because the deal depended on his reputation," Benedict said. "That is not true. You accessed the internal investigation as your medical representative. You were not authorized to review staff statements. I was protecting you. You were protecting an acquisition." Lawrence's composure broke. "Everything I have done has been to protect this family's future." Benedict looked at him for a long time. That sentence has excused more cruelty than greed ever needed. The next morning, Benedict informed the hospital board that he would suspend all future donations unless an external investigation replaced the compromised internal review. He did not threaten to withdraw funding to force Amara's reinstatement. He demanded that the evidence be examined independently and made clear that the result had to stand even if it embarrassed him, his son, or the hospital bearing his name. The board agreed within hours. Havel was suspended from performing procedures. Desmond Keel was placed on leave. Chief Medical Officer Ansel Rourke resigned after emails showed he advised administrators to contain the nursing narrative before the donor family loses confidence. Celia Varn admitted that she knew Amara's dismissal was premature but failed to oppose it because she feared the cardiac wing would lose funding. Tessa and the pharmacist gave full testimony. Maeve provided the final confirmation. "She saved his life," Maeve told investigators. "I performed the emergency procedure, but Amara recognized the problem, forced the response, and prevented us from making 2 fatal mistakes. Had she obeyed quietly, Benedict Wycliffe would be dead." The independent report was released 6 weeks later. It cleared Amara of every allegation. It concluded that her clinical judgment met the highest professional standards and that her refusal to follow unsafe orders was justified. It found that hospital administrators allowed donor influence to compromise staff discipline, record review, and patient safety. Havel lost his surgical privileges and later faced a licensing investigation. No one claimed he had intended to harm Benedict, but intent did not erase the consequences of arrogance. He had dismissed accurate warnings because they came from someone he considered beneath him in the hierarchy. Desmond was terminated for manipulating the review packet. The hospital offered Amara reinstatement, back pay, and a formal apology. She did not accept immediately. Before making a decision, she asked to meet Benedict. He was recovering at a rehabilitation center when she arrived. For the first time, there were no security officers, attorneys, or executives in the room. Benedict sat beside a window overlooking a garden, his silver cane resting against the chair. Amara remained near the door. "You asked to see me. I owe you more than that. You do not owe me your life. I would not have it without you. You would not have it without the entire team. The report says you were the reason the team acted in time." Amara did not respond. Benedict gestured toward the chair opposite him. She sat. "My son fired you while I was too weak to understand what was happening," he said. "The hospital allowed it because of my family's money. I benefited from that system long before it was used against you. You did not sign my termination letter. My name was above the door. That is not the same thing." "No," Benedict said, "but it explains why people were afraid to stop him." He placed the hospital's reinstatement proposal on the table. "They want you back. They want the scandal to end. What do you want?" "I want nurses to be able to challenge dangerous orders without losing their jobs. I can fund that." Amara's expression changed. "That is exactly the problem." Benedict waited. "You believe money can correct whatever money distorted," she continued. "A new program with your name will not fix a culture that listened to your son more carefully than it listened to the chart." "What would?" "Independent clinical review, legal protection for staff who question unsafe orders, no donor access to personnel investigations, recorded reasons when a nurse is removed from a case, and a board seat for frontline medical staff." Benedict nodded slowly. "Anything else?" "Remove your name from the cardiac wing." He looked genuinely surprised. "Why?" "Because patients should not enter a hospital wondering whether the largest donor's family has more influence over their care than the people treating them." Benedict considered the bronze letters that had pleased him when the wing opened. Done. Amara returned to St. Orison 3 months later, but not under the old conditions. She became Director of Clinical Escalation and Nursing Safety, a role with authority to review disputed orders independently. The position did not place her above physicians. It made sure no staff member was silenced solely because someone more powerful disagreed. The cardiac wing was renamed the St. Orison Center for Critical Care. A plaque near the nurses' station listed the reforms adopted after Benedict's case, but Amara refused to let the hospital describe her as a lone hero. The plaque read, "Patient safety depends on every professional having the courage and protection to speak when something is wrong." Lawrence was removed from Wycliffe Urban Holdings by a board vote led by Benedict. The clinic acquisition collapsed after Havel's financial connection became public. Lawrence claimed his father had humiliated him to satisfy the press. Benedict answered privately, "You humiliated yourself when you saw a nurse save my life and decided her authority was more dangerous than the mistake she exposed." Lawrence retained financial inheritance rights but lost operational control of the company. Benedict did not disown him. He required him to live without the position he had treated as proof of his judgment. Sabine became interim chairwoman and introduced conflict of interest rules preventing family executives from arranging medical care through companies in which they held private investments. Tessa was promoted to senior critical care nurse. Maeve became head of the Emergency Review Council. The pharmacist whose statement disappeared was appointed to the Hospital Ethics Committee. Liana attended the public hearing where the hospital formally apologized to her mother. Afterward, she asked Amara why she had returned to the place that fired her. "Because leaving would protect me," Amara said. "Returning with the power to protect someone else may change what happens next time." A year after the emergency, Benedict visited the cardiac unit without cameras. He walked slowly with his cane and stopped beside the room where his heart had failed. Amara was reviewing a chart with 2 new nurses. One of them recognized him and became nervous. Amara did not. "You're walking farther," she said. "My therapist says I complain too much." "Your therapist is observant." Benedict smiled. Near the nurses' station, he noticed a framed copy of the original clinical timeline. It did not include his fortune, the family scandal, or the lawsuit. It showed only facts, changing vital signs, warnings, orders, interventions, and the moment circulation returned. Amara joined him. This is what saved me, he asked. This is the record of what happened. Lawrence believed he could change the story. He almost did. Benedict studied the line marking 8:43 p.m. when Amara warned that he would not survive transport. Were you afraid? Yes. You did not look afraid in the video. Fear is not always visible when someone has work to do. Before leaving, Benedict asked whether she still remembered the first words he spoke after waking. You asked why I was being removed, she said. I also remember something from before the surgery. What? I asked you to keep my children from turning the room into a board meeting. Amara folded her arms. I failed at that part. For the first time since the crisis, Benedict laughed without pain. The millionaire's son had fired Amara because he believed a nurse's voice could be erased by wealth, status, and a famous surgeon's reputation. For several weeks, he succeeded. Her access disappeared. Her name was placed inside a disciplinary file. Her actions were rewritten as panic, interference, and disobedience, but the hospital records preserved what power tried to soften. They showed every warning she gave, every order she questioned, every minute the treatment was delayed, and every decision that kept Benedict Wycliffe from dying. Amara had not saved him because she was fearless. She saved him because she refused to let fear of a doctor, a donor, or a millionaire's son become more important than the life in front of her.